What if the most shocking mystery in rock history wasn't played on stage, but buried beneath the earth, hidden in silence, in the deep underbelly of one of the world's most iconic homes? It all began with a phone call. A single, cryptic tip delivered anonymously to a quiet FBI extension in Los Angeles. The voice on the other end didn't scream or stammer. It simply said, "You need to look under the Osbourne estate. There are things there no one should ever find." At first, it was dismissed. A prank, perhaps. A delusion. But something in the caller's tone stuck with the agent who answered that phone. There was no plea for money, no threats, no rambling story. Just that one sentence. And in that silence that followed, there was something chilling, something haunting. It felt real. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Within 48 hours, a silent, off-the-books surveillance operation began. Agents, posing as construction inspectors, drone operators flying over the estate under FAA flight drills, and even satellite thermal imaging were brought in. And the deeper they dug, metaphorically and eventually literally, the more something felt off. Why was a mansion, known mostly for rock star parties, reality TV fame, and the semi-chaotic lives of its eccentric inhabitants, suddenly on the radar of federal investigators? Why were energy readings in the foundation showing anomalies, colder zones where there should be heat, blocked areas in blueprints that didn't align with what engineers saw? Why were contractors who had worked on basement renovations refusing to speak or had mysteriously closed shop? These were not the signs of an ordinary residence, and certainly not the signs of an ordinary family. Ozzy Osbourne, the godfather of heavy metal, the Prince of Darkness, the man who bit the head off a bat on stage and stumbled into history as both a legend and a living meme, had become the center of something far more sinister. This was no longer about a rock star's past antics or Hollywood folklore. This was a full-blown federal investigation into what would soon be described by one forensic investigator as the most disturbing domestic scene discovered on U.S. soil in over 50 years. When the operation officially began, it didn't start with sirens or a battering ram. It began quietly, like all truly haunting stories do. Unmarked vehicles rolled into the neighborhood just before dawn, settling like shadows against hedges and fences. Agents dressed like utility workers entered the property under the guise of a routine safety inspection, something to do with underground wiring. The moment they reached the wine cellar, their instruments went berserk. A small patch of the floor, cool to the touch and made of older wood than the rest, rang hollow. It didn't match any known blueprints or contractor records. What they found beneath it sent shockwaves through every agency from the FBI to Interpol. A latch, a cold metal latch with a hidden locking mechanism, and beyond it, a staircase descending into darkness. The first agents to enter the underground chamber would later require psychiatric evaluations. Some would never return to active duty. The space beneath the Osbourne mansion was not just an illegal construction. It was a labyrinth of stone and steel, more than 2,000 square feet wide, lined with steel walls and temperature-controlled environments. And in that buried chamber, sealed from the world for possibly decades, lay 99 preserved human remains, each encased, each documented, each disturbingly pristine. Some were male, some female. Some were dressed in 1960s clothing, others in styles barely a decade old. Many were eerily intact. No decay, no trauma, simply suspended in time, like relics in a twisted museum. Others bore markings that investigators struggled to identify. Symbols, carvings, even chains that seemed ceremonial rather than practical. Within days, the media got wind of it. At first, they were met with denial. Ozzy's representatives called the rumors grotesque fiction. Sharon Osbourne disappeared from social media entirely. Kelly and Jack offered no comment. But then, the satellite images leaked. A private whistleblower inside the Bureau released partial reports. And finally, one blurry photograph slipped through the cracks. The underground chamber, its steel walls gleaming under fluorescent lights, a row of what unmistakably looked like preserved human bodies, all laid out in silence. That was the moment everything changed. Public reaction ranged from disbelief to hysteria. How could this be possible? Why would someone like Ozzy Osbourne, a man loved for his chaos but never feared for it, be involved in something so monstrous? Was he even aware of what lay beneath his home? Or had he, like the rest of us, been playing a part in a much bigger, far darker story? Reporters began digging, not just into the incident, but into Ozzy's past. Old interviews were pulled. His lyrical themes, once dismissed as theatrical, were now examined line by line for hidden meanings. Some fans defended him, saying this had to be a setup, a conspiracy against the rock legend. Others weren't so sure. Then came the twist that no one saw coming. A second underground entrance was discovered, one that led not to a chamber, but to a recording studio, hidden behind a sliding bookshelf. And inside that studio was a wall covered in photographs. Some dated, some modern, some showing people who had never been identified, all of them tagged with numbers. Those numbers matched the initial forensic registry the FBI had created for the preserved remains. It wasn't just a crime scene. It was a catalog. As this story unfolds, we're going to take you on a journey through every detail. The architecture of the chamber, the timeline of the bodies, Ozzy's bizarre onstage confessions, the unsettling behavior of his family, and even the strange interviews he gave years ago that seemed like gibberish back then, but read now like a cryptic warning. We'll explore the broader implications. How many celebrities build secret rooms? How often do high-profile families avoid scrutiny simply because they seem too famous to suspect? And most importantly, was this really the doing of a rock star spiraling out of control, or is Ozzy Osbourne just the face of a far larger web of darkness, one rooted in elite privilege, celebrity secrecy, and rituals so ancient we've stopped questioning them? Prepare to discover unsettling truths, twisted connections, and a level of secrecy that even the most devoted fans never imagined. From the eerily quiet corridors of an underground mausoleum to the broken silence of a public icon's collapse, this is more than a scandal. It's the unraveling of an American myth. By the end of this video, you'll see Ozzy Osbourne in a completely new light. And whether that image leaves you horrified or heartbroken, well, that's a choice only you can make. Long before the FBI ever stepped foot on the Osbourne estate, and long before headlines screamed about hidden chambers and preserved human remains, the mansion itself had already become a character in its own right, a symbol of rock and roll excess, eerie eccentricity, and an unsettling sense of spectacle. Yet behind the high gates, beneath the celebrity tours and carefully manicured grounds, there existed a silence so old, so carefully preserved, it might as well have been part of the architecture. Located in one of Beverly Hills' most secluded neighborhoods, the estate spans multiple acres of rolling hills, hidden drives, and thick foliage designed to keep prying eyes at bay. When Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne purchased the mansion in the late 1990s, it wasn't just a place to live. It was a fortress, a kingdom, a walled city of secrets. From the very beginning, those close to the family noted how oddly self-contained the property was. Everything they needed was within its walls: recording studios, ghost houses, a mini medical clinic, security centers, and more. And while most celebrity homes offered similar luxuries, the Osbourne mansion felt different, more fortified, more closed off. Contractors brought in to renovate the property were made to sign airtight NDAs. According to one now-retired project manager who asked to remain anonymous, certain blueprints were restricted even from those working on-site. There were zones, he said, sections we weren't even allowed to enter, even though we were hired to overhaul the whole place. It was like they already had a second team we didn't know about handling the weird stuff. This weird stuff would become the subject of endless speculation among neighbors and industry insiders. Reports of loud, metallic clanging in the dead of night. Strange delivery trucks entering the rear gate at 3 a.m. and leaving before dawn. Stories of pets going missing near the wooded perimeters. Even the local postal worker allegedly refused to deliver directly to the back of the estate, stating that something about it felt wrong. More than one ex-employee, nannies, gardeners, and even private chefs have since come forward anonymously, describing the same unsettling rulebook. Stay out of the cellar, never ask about the metal door in the northeast wall, and if the alarms ever go off after midnight, don't investigate. Just leave immediately and return the next day like nothing happened. For years, all of this was dismissed as the natural byproduct of celebrity paranoia. After all, Ozzy was no stranger to eccentricity. His long-standing reputation as the Prince of Darkness, paired with his substance-fueled antics and satanic stage persona, made these rumors almost expected. Fans loved the mythology, the chaos, the theatricality. The idea that his home reflected the same madness as his music wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated. But over time, some stories refused to fade. Take, for example, the story of the young intern who allegedly vanished after a summer spent assisting Ozzy in cataloging memorabilia for his then-upcoming reality show. According to a few fringe online forums, she was last seen in a group photo taken on the estate's back lawn. After that, no trace. No missing persons report, no funeral, no obituary. Her social media accounts were deleted. Her name barely mentioned. Her family, if they even existed, never spoke publicly. Then there were the tales of the mansion's previous owner, a reclusive industrialist who reportedly built the original structure in the 1950s. The man, whose name has been redacted in many property records due to old legal disputes, was rumored to be involved in classified military experiments. Some say he used the estate to conduct psychological trials. Others whisper about Cold War experiments involving sensory deprivation chambers built directly beneath the home. At least 2 alleged escape tunnels from the basement were sealed off in the 1970s. Whether these stories were fact or just tabloid fuel, one thing became clear after the FBI's discovery. Something had always been off, and the signs had been hiding in plain sight. The estate's landscaping, for instance, had unusual patterns. Garden beds shaped in near-perfect spirals, supposedly aligning with astrological dates. Pathways formed like runes when viewed from above, a fact noted by drone operators during the Bureau's initial flyovers. Security cameras placed in odd angles, watching areas where no entrances or windows existed. When investigators later reviewed old satellite data, they found a consistent heat signature coming from the same section of the basement, an area previously believed to be unused. Blueprints for the house were an even bigger mystery. 3 different architectural firms who had worked on the estate at different times over the past 3 decades all had conflicting layouts. One plan showed only a single basement level. Another showed a storage area below the recording studio. The third had no mention of a basement at all. And yet, when 3D scanning equipment was used during the federal raid, it revealed nearly 2,500 square feet of undocumented space buried beneath the wine cellar and stretching under the main living quarters. Even stranger were the records of construction permits filed over the years. Most were routine, kitchen remodels, roofing work, landscaping expansions. But in 2003, a permit was filed under a shell company linked to a foreign bank account, requesting permission to stabilize foundational systems using steel-reinforced substructures. That permit was approved, but no contractor name was attached. No invoice. No inspection records. Nothing. To the public, the Osbourne estate was a whimsical blend of Gothic flair and Hollywood luxury. To fans, it was the castle of a rock god. But to those who had entered its deeper layers, it was something else entirely. Something darker, older, and more secretive than anyone could have guessed. One particularly strange feature that stood out to investigators was a narrow staircase hidden behind the East Wing's library. Tucked behind a false wall of leather-bound books, the stairs descended into a narrow corridor that appeared to be made of solid iron, lined with padding similar to that used in soundproofed asylum cells. At the end of the hallway was a sealed door. No knob, no keyhole, just a fingerprint scanner and a small emblem etched into the steel. A stylized serpent coiled around a clock, its tail wrapped tightly around the hands pointing to midnight. No one could explain the symbol. It wasn't Ozzy's logo. It wasn't tied to any known company or secret society, at least not officially. But for those with a background in ancient symbology, the imagery was unmistakable. The serpent devouring time is often interpreted as a warning, a marker of rituals not meant for public eyes. This door, when finally breached, led directly to the room where the preserved bodies were found. Neighbors have since admitted to always feeling uneasy about the property, even as they smiled for the Osbournes' reality TV cameras. One elderly woman recalled an incident from 2005 when her dog broke free during a walk and ran toward the Osbourne estate. The dog never returned. That same night, she says, she saw a group of men in robes walking toward the woods behind the property, carrying lanterns and chanting. At the time, she believed it was some kind of Hollywood Halloween prank. But after the revelations from the FBI, she said she's not so sure. Another former neighbor, a retired LAPD officer, said he once responded to a silent alarm triggered in the estate's main gate. He and his partner were waved off at the entrance by private security, but he caught a glimpse of something unusual in the distance. A heavy crate being wheeled into the basement door, accompanied by a man in what looked like surgical gear. When asked later why he never filed a report, he shrugged. "It was the Osbournes," he said. "You don't question the rich and the famous. You just assume it's weird, but not illegal." In hindsight, that assumption may have enabled one of the most elaborate cover-ups in recent celebrity history. The mansion, once revered as a quirky landmark, now feels like a monument to silence, a structure built not just to protect a family's privacy, but to conceal a darkness buried far deeper than anyone ever imagined. And as the investigation deepens, questions about the estate's history and those who designed it will likely become just as critical as the mystery of who, or what, was kept in its underground chambers. It was a night that began like any other in Beverly Hills. Cool breeze in the air, the faint hum of traffic far off in the distance, and nothing to suggest that history was about to be made. Behind the tall hedges and fortified walls of the Osbourne estate, everything seemed quiet, still, and unremarkable. But that silence was a mask. Beneath it, a storm was brewing, one carefully orchestrated and executed by some of the most elite investigative agents in the country. It wasn't a raid in the traditional sense. No battering rams. No helicopters blaring overhead. This was a precision operation, one designed not to draw attention, but to extract truth. It had taken months of preparation, satellite imaging, classified surveillance, and countless redacted reports to reach this point. And when the Bureau finally moved, it did so with a calculated silence that made the entire event feel like a ghost story in the making. At exactly 3:14 a.m., a convoy of 5 unmarked black SUVs rolled into the gated neighborhood under the cover of darkness. Each vehicle carried a specialized team, 2 forensic analysts, 1 subterranean structure expert, 1 cybersecurity agent, and an armed field operative trained in rapid response. They parked in staggered formation along the outer edge of the Osbourne estate's southern border, where the surveillance teams had identified an entrance that had been previously sealed with concrete but recently reopened. Notably, there was no warrant publicly announced, no local police notified. This was handled by a discreet federal task force, one typically reserved for matters of national security. The operations lead officer, referred to in internal documents only as Agent K, gave the signal to initiate at precisely 3:17 a.m. A drone, equipped with thermal and night vision, hovered above the mansion, sending back real-time visuals to a mobile command center parked 2 blocks away in a disguised utility truck. On the ground, the agents moved swiftly and quietly. 2 scaled a retaining wall using portable grappling gear, disabling the motion sensors along the perimeter. Another pair jammed the estate's outgoing communications systems, severing Wi-Fi, cellular, and even landline connections without alerting any internal alarms. From that moment, the Osbourne estate became completely isolated. No calls could be made. No footage could be uploaded. The house, and everything within it, was locked in a digital blackout. Entry into the mansion itself wasn't forced. It didn't need to be. The team had obtained a set of override codes tied to the estate's advanced security system, codes that reportedly came from a whistleblower who had worked closely with the Osbourne family's personal tech advisor. The doors clicked open with an eerie quiet, as if welcoming the intrusion. The agents entered in 2 waves, one through the main floor and another directly targeting the wine cellar in the west wing, where months of data had pinpointed unusual fluctuations in heat and airflow. The first team secured the upper levels of the house, confirming that no residents were present. According to internal logs, Ozzy Osbourne had been flown to a private medical facility in Switzerland just 2 days prior for what his management called routine neurological care. Sharon was reportedly in London visiting relatives. Kelly and Jack had both posted Instagram stories from separate locations, far from Los Angeles. Whether this absence was coincidence or intentional remains a matter of heated debate. Inside the wine cellar, things escalated quickly. A floor panel, identified earlier in thermal scans, was located behind a stack of aged barrels that hadn't been moved in years. The panel was dustless, untouched, clearly newer than the rest of the room. When agents pried it open, they discovered not only a hidden hatch, but an entire steel framework built beneath the floor, something akin to a Cold War-era bomb shelter entrance. There were no visible hinges, no standard lock, only a circular indentation designed to respond to biometric input. This was where the mission shifted from inspection to exposure. A specialized tool was deployed, designed to simulate biometric fingerprints using data scrapped from previous digital records. Within seconds, the seal disengaged with a metallic hiss. Cold air rushed upward, thick and sterile. Lights embedded along the wall of the descending stairwell flickered on, as though activated by the opening of the hatch. The agents began their descent, one by one, into the darkness that had waited, untouched, for decades. The first landing revealed a narrow corridor lined with steel walls and smooth black flooring. It was unnaturally clean, almost surgical in its design. The temperature, according to mission logs, dropped to a consistent 50 degrees Fahrenheit, ideal for long-term preservation of organic materials. Then they reached the chamber. At first, the lead agent described the room as a cross between a crypt and a scientific lab. Rows of clear capsules lined the walls, cylinder-like structures not unlike the cryotanks used in advanced research. Each contained a human form, some curled in fetal position, others resting on their backs. Skin tones varied, clothing styles varied, but the preservation was flawless. Some looked asleep, others frozen in states of distress. One capsule contained what appeared to be a child, no older than 12, dressed in a 1970s scout uniform, his eyes open, lips parted in mid-breath. A small workstation stood at the far end of the chamber, monitors, data logs, and a thick ledger bound in black leather. The book's contents included dates, names, and what appeared to be coded notes. Some entries were as old as 1963. Others ended abruptly in 2017. As the agents took photos, samples, and logged details for the record, one analyst reportedly broke down, collapsing into a fit of tremors. The silence, the cold, and the overwhelming sense that what they were seeing had been intentionally hidden, not forgotten, but protected, shattered whatever illusion they had of this being a misunderstanding. Just beyond the main room, another corridor branched off into a second chamber. Here, the setup was different, less clinical, more ceremonial. The walls were stone, old and crumbling. At the center sat a raised platform covered in crimson velvet, and surrounding it were various artifacts, chalices, daggers, bones arranged in symmetrical formations, and symbols drawn in ash. At the base of the platform was a plaque engraved with the same image found on the steel door, a serpent coiled around a clock stuck at midnight. Whatever this room was meant for, it wasn't science. It was something else entirely. The agents documented everything. Forensics teams were flown in that same morning. By 9 a.m., the chamber had been photographed, sealed, and tagged for containment. A mobile laboratory was set up outside the property, where tissue samples and air quality readings were processed in real time. Despite the monumental discovery, the Bureau made no public statement. News of the raid was suppressed by emergency-level federal orders, and the media remained unaware for nearly 4 full days. But silence is hard to maintain in a town like Los Angeles, especially when entire blocks get rerouted for emergency electrical repairs, and low-flying drones continue to hover over celebrity homes for days without explanation. It was a janitor from a nearby estate who first leaked the story to a small local blogger. He had seen the trucks, heard the hum of machinery through the trees, and he had a friend on the inside, a tech contractor temporarily hired to stabilize servers in the Bureau's mobile lab. That contractor sent a single, pixelated photo to the janitor's phone, a room, gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights, lined with what looked like pods. That image found its way to Reddit. From there, Twitter, then Instagram. Within 12 hours, every major news network was scrambling to confirm. Rumors flew. Speculation exploded. Was this a mass grave? A science experiment gone wrong? A forgotten military bunker? Or something far more terrifying? The FBI, caught between damage control and sheer disbelief, finally issued a vague statement. The Bureau is currently conducting an investigation into an undisclosed private property in the Los Angeles area. At this time, no public threat has been identified. No further comments will be made. It was too late. The world had already seen. The air inside the bunker was unlike anything the FBI agents had encountered before. Thick, dry, and tainted with an unplaceable scent, somewhere between aged dust and industrial chemicals. The lighting came from long fluorescent tubes embedded seamlessly into the steel ceiling, casting a pale, surgical glow over everything below. It wasn't just a hidden room or basement chamber. This was an entirely separate world, designed, built, and operated in total secrecy for an unfathomable amount of time. At first glance, the underground structure could have been mistaken for an ultra-secure laboratory or panic shelter. Reinforced walls, seamless, matte black flooring, ventilation systems that hummed with the precision of hospital-grade equipment. Everything was sterile, too sterile for something built beneath a home famous for its eccentricity and chaos. But the further the team advanced, the more it became clear. This place wasn't built for survival. It was built for preservation. On the main wall of the largest chamber stood a series of containment units, 99 in total. Cylindrical, glass-encased, and arranged in perfect symmetry along the room's perimeter. They stood like sentinels, each capsule bathed in a faint blue glow from the base, each housing what could only be described as preserved human bodies. No two alike, and yet, all sharing the same haunting silence. They were organized not by age or gender, but seemingly by condition. Some fully dressed, some unclothed, some curled into fetal positions, and others appearing almost posed, their faces eerily peaceful or frozen in fear. The first forensic officer to approach the glass pod stopped short after only a few steps. He muttered a single phrase into his radio headset. "They're not decomposed. They're intact." And it was true. Many of the bodies showed no visible signs of decay. Hair, nails, skin, all astonishingly preserved. A few had slight discoloration, others bore minor abrasions or age spots. But none were in the expected condition of long-buried corpses. Whatever method had been used here, it had succeeded in halting nature's process. Each pod was labeled with a code, 6-digit combinations etched into small brass plaques screwed into the floor beneath. The codes did not match any known mortuary catalog, DNA index, or hospital identification system. Instead, agents later discovered they matched a private database stored on one of the encrypted computers found in the corner of the chamber, files labeled inventory_A1 through inventory_J9. Each file contained a timestamp, rough biometric data, and vague descriptors like specimen shows low tissue decay, or preservation achieved on third trial. No names, no personal identifiers, just cold, sterile cataloging. A medical examiner brought in that same day opened the first pod using a mechanical tool provided by the FBI's evidence response team. Inside was the body of a man appearing to be in his late 40s, dressed in what looked like 1980s office attire, blazer, tie, even a pocket square. His eyes were closed, hands resting on his chest as if in prayer. Upon further inspection, it was discovered that his skin was unnaturally taut, almost waxen, and retained a level of elasticity inconsistent with any natural embalming technique. Initial tests for formaldehyde, methanol, and glutaraldehyde yielded no matches. Instead, traces of a chemical compound not listed in any public toxicology database were found in the dermis, something later described in internal FBI documents as synthetic biopolymer compound X. Where it came from, how it worked, and who developed it remains under investigation. But the horror didn't end with the pods. Deeper into the chamber, a separate section revealed what could only be interpreted as a preparation area. Stainless steel tables lined the walls, each equipped with surgical lighting, retractable restraints, and drains embedded in the floor. Jars of unidentified fluids were stacked in cabinets, along with medical tools ranging from scalpels and bone saws to archaic-looking instruments no one could name. A freezer in the corner contained bags of what appeared to be preserved organs, labeled only by code and date. In one small refrigerated room, agents found stacks of old VHS tapes and digital hard drives. each labeled with cryptic titles like Test 17, Failure, Subject 03 Awake, and Reaction Series, Batch C. No content from these tapes has been made public, but insiders who claim to have seen segments describe them as profoundly disturbing, with footage that includes sedated individuals undergoing what appears to be consciousness monitoring, muscle reflex testing, and even forced exposure to visual stimuli. Perhaps the most haunting discovery in the chamber was a large panel of photographs affixed to a rusted corkboard against the back wall. 99 portraits, black and white, each corresponding to one of the bodies inside the pods. Some were mugshots, some casual snapshots. Others looked like professional headshots, as if plucked from resumes or modeling portfolios. Each had a number scrawled in the corner, matching the codes found beneath the capsules. What was even more jarring were the date ranges beneath each image. Many spanned years, 1975 to 1982, 1990 to 2001, and even one as recent as 2014 to 2019. The implication was terrifying. These people had not died at the time of entry. They had lived, and perhaps even been studied, observed, or contained for years before being preserved. Not far from the photo panel was a filing cabinet labeled Special Subjects. Inside were handwritten notes, brief bios, and medical records that appeared forged or altered. One folder detailed a woman named Erica H., age 27, last seen in Las Vegas in 1994. Her file included an image from a security camera showing her entering what appeared to be the Osbourne estate's back gate. No records of her leaving were ever found. Other files were even stranger. One man was listed simply as the Screamer, with notes stating, requires double sedation. Vocal cords regrow abnormally fast. Another, labeled Specimen F3, was noted as resistant to compound. Still aware after stage 3. Must not be left unmonitored. Whether these notes were real, fictional, or part of some psychological project remains unclear. But their existence sent chills down the spines of every expert consulted. A separate wing of the underground facility, accessible through a biometric scanner rigged to respond to 2 simultaneous handprints, contained what looked like a command center. Multiple monitors displayed what were once live feeds of various parts of the estate. Kitchen, hallway, bedroom, and even outside gardens. Footage appeared to have been looping on a 24-hour cycle, with timestamps suggesting years of continuous surveillance. Most disturbing of all were the hidden camera angles of interior spaces that hadn't been listed in the home's official blueprints. Bedrooms, dressing areas, even bathrooms. It was clear that someone had not only been collecting people, they had been watching them. Who installed the cameras? Who built the chamber? Why did the Osbourne family never publicly acknowledge its existence? These are questions that investigators are still struggling to answer. But it wasn't just the layout or contents of the bunker that disturbed investigators. It was the design. The architectural style was entirely different from the rest of the estate. The materials used were not from local suppliers, and the welding work on the steel beams bore markings linked to an obscure Eastern European fabrication firm that has since gone defunct. The electric grid was independent. A generator, disguised as an old wine barrel above ground, fed constant power to the underground structure. How long had this place been operational? And who funded it? In an especially chilling twist, a note was found taped behind one of the monitors. Written in jagged handwriting on an aged scrap of paper, it read, "They asked to be remembered. Now they never stop watching." No signature. No date. As the agents emerged from the bunker, eyes wide, hands shaking, no one spoke. Not at first. Some stood in the hallway for several minutes, gathering themselves. Others left the house entirely and sat in their vehicles, staring into the dark, as if trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Whatever this place was, lab, tomb, shrine, prison. It was a secret carefully built, meticulously maintained, and never meant to be discovered. The discovery of 99 preserved bodies in the hidden bunker beneath the Osbourne estate triggered a wave of horror across investigative agencies and the public alike. Yet beyond the immediate shock, it was the chilling pattern and staggering timeline of these remains that unraveled a far more complex mystery. These were not victims from a single event, nor were they dumped hastily in a mass grave. Each body was individually preserved, cataloged, and, most disturbingly, arranged in a sequence that suggested years, even decades, of careful accumulation. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a project, a purpose, a design. Once forensic specialists began analyzing the remains, the initial assumption was that they were relatively recent. The exceptional state of preservation led some to believe that they had been collected in the last 10 years. However, carbon dating, chemical testing, and trace analysis quickly shattered that theory. The results revealed that many of the individuals had died long before the 2000s, some as far back as the early 1960s. Others had perished in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. In fact, the only era not represented among the preserved remains appeared to be the early 2000s, raising yet another baffling question. Why did the collection stop or pause during that time? Each body told a different story. One belonged to a woman estimated to be in her late 30s, dressed in what appeared to be a flight attendant uniform from the 1970s, complete with a vintage name tag bearing the name Carla M. Cross-referencing airline archives and missing persons databases revealed that Carla Martinez was a Pan Am employee who vanished during a layover in Los Angeles in 1974. Her case had long been considered cold, with no leads, no witnesses, and no trace, until now. Another victim, a teenage male wearing a scout uniform, matched the 1982 case of Henry Blackwell, who went missing on a camping trip in Northern California. His remains were identified by a dental record match. Notably, the autopsy showed no signs of trauma, no broken bones, no drug presence. His body was as pristine as if he had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. In total, over half of the 99 bodies were linked to missing persons cases across the United States. But not all. Some had never been reported missing at all. No names, no social security numbers, no fingerprints in any criminal or medical database. These ghosts appeared to have existed only in the confines of this subterranean vault. Even more perplexing was the uniformity in their state of preservation. Despite the wide range of apparent death dates, the bodies all showed a remarkably consistent physical condition. There were no signs of traditional embalming, no waxy buildup or formaldehyde discoloration. Tissue elasticity, hair quality, and even eye clarity remained intact in ways that defied the known limits of forensic science. The compound found in their tissue, later nicknamed X serum by forensic analysts, did not resemble any known embalming fluid or cryogenic preservative. In fact, it appeared to be synthetic in nature, constructed at a molecular level to prevent cellular decay without freezing or dehydration. Some theorized it was a product of advanced biomedical research, possibly sourced from classified military labs. Others believed it was an experimental compound never publicly disclosed, perhaps the byproduct of pharmaceutical testing long buried by those in power. And yet, even among the horror, there was something disturbingly methodical about the way the victims were arranged. The chamber wasn't just a warehouse of the dead, it was an archive. Bodies were categorized not by era or gender, but by what experts eventually called response stage. Initial internal notes from the scene described subtle changes in posture, facial expressions, and even musculature tension. Some bodies appeared completely relaxed, with slight smiles or peaceful resting positions. Others were stiff, as if in mid-scream or defensive poses, with arms raised or jaws clenched. A few even had notes pinned to their capsules with cryptic remarks such as resistant to induction or still reactive under sedation. What did this mean? The working theory from behavioral analysts and trauma psychologists brought into the case was deeply unsettling. The victims may have been observed over time, not just held, but tested. Psychological resistance, physical durability, or perhaps even spiritual responses to confinement or chemical exposure. One internal memo speculated that the sequence of preservation might correspond with a type of psychological experimentation designed to capture specific emotional states: fear, peace, resignation, hysteria, at the moment of death or sedation. If true, this meant someone had not only collected these people, but studied them, recorded them, treated them as samples rather than human beings. Further analysis revealed another disturbing detail. Many of the preserved bodies had undergone slight modifications post-mortem, small incisions behind the ear, at the base of the skull, and in the sternum. Inside, tiny metallic implants were discovered. These were not modern tracking chips or medical devices. Instead, they resembled early versions of analog data storage devices, almost like miniature tape reels or frequency transmitters. Their origin remains unknown, and no manufacturer has come forward to claim knowledge of them. Perhaps the most alarming correlation emerged when victims' last known locations were plotted on a digital map. The results revealed a clustering pattern, not random at all. The majority had disappeared from cities where Ozzy Osbourne was either touring, recording, or temporarily residing during those years. While this doesn't directly implicate him, especially with a long list of handlers, crew, and entourage around him, it raises terrifying questions. Did someone within his circle orchestrate these disappearances? Were victims lured under the cover of music and entertainment? Was the rock and roll world used as camouflage for something more sinister? One file in particular sent chills through the entire investigation team. Labeled simply Subject Alpha, it contained dozens of handwritten pages tracking the physical and psychological condition of a woman over a span of 15 years. Notes included sleep patterns, blood samples, behavioral triggers, and dream journals. The final entry read, "Subject showing signs of irreversible dissociation. Suitable for preservation. Schedule induction for Thursday. Do not delay." That woman was later identified as a music journalist who vanished in 1988 after being assigned to cover Ozzy's solo tour. Yet the trail of horror didn't end with the victims' identities. Forensic teams began investigating how long the bodies had been stored without external contamination or decomposition. They discovered that the air filtration system was equipped with military-grade HEPA purifiers and a custom humidity control network. Sensors monitored everything: air pressure, temperature, oxygen saturation. The technology was cutting-edge, yet installed in a structure that hadn't appeared on any building permit or architectural blueprint. How was it all powered? Hidden behind a false wall in a side tunnel was a compact nuclear backup generator, something only used in high-security government facilities. It was shielded, silenced, and fully functional. An engineer working with the FBI called it overkill, stating that the generator alone could power the entire house for over 6 months without external connection. The fuel rods were recent, meaning someone had been maintaining it regularly, refueling as recently as the last 2 years. This wasn't an abandoned operation. It was active, monitored, and operational. One investigator, speaking off record, remarked that the whole thing felt more like a library of experiments than a crime scene. Every detail, the alignment of the pods, the chemical precision, the data logs, pointed not to madness, but method. Someone had kept these bodies preserved for a reason. Whether that reason was scientific, ritualistic, or something even darker, no one could say. The victims, now slowly being identified through painstaking DNA analysis and global database comparisons, spanned a disturbing demographic spectrum. Ages ranged from early teens to elderly. Ethnicities varied, but many came from marginalized backgrounds: runaways, the homeless, the undocumented. Easy targets. People who would not be missed by society, but who were nonetheless valuable in the eyes of whoever had been running the operation. Yet in the center of the chamber, one pod remained empty. It was larger than the others, positioned on a raised platform. Its brass plate bore a code not found anywhere else in the system: 0. No data file, no description, no reference in the physical ledgers. Just an open chamber, waiting. For whom? As analysts dug further into the timeline, another horrifying detail emerged. While the most recent confirmed body was preserved in 2017, the digital log entries continued through 2023. Someone had still been operating the system, checking the pods, adjusting the temperature, updating status reports. Someone had been watching. Someone may still be involved. What began as a tale of hidden remains had evolved into a timeline of terror, one that stretched over half a century, crossing state lines, identities, and eras. The more investigators uncovered, the more impossible the mystery became. These were not random killings. They were coordinated, controlled, curated. And the one question no one could answer, the one question that kept waking agents in the middle of the night, sweating and speechless, was this: why were they preserved? As news of the FBI's shocking discovery exploded across the globe, all eyes turned to one man. the man whose name was forever tied to the estate where 99 preserved human bodies had been uncovered. Ozzy Osbourne, once celebrated as the godfather of heavy metal and the chaotic heart of reality TV's most infamous family, now found himself under a level of scrutiny he had never encountered, even at the peak of his most controversial years. And in those first crucial hours after the news broke, there was silence. No tweet, no press release, no appearance, no statement from Ozzy, his wife Sharon, or any member of the Osbourne family. Just a vacuum of response that grew heavier by the hour. Initially, media speculation ranged from cautious defense to outright accusations. Tabloid headlines screamed of satanic rituals beneath the mansion, while more measured outlets attempted to piece together timelines. Where was Ozzy at the time of the raid? Was he aware of what had been buried under his own home? Could a man so deeply involved in decades of touring, substance abuse, and celebrity chaos truly have orchestrated or even known about something so dark and organized? According to official records, Ozzy had been undergoing neurological treatment in Switzerland at the time the raid was executed. He had been photographed in a wheelchair, flanked by security and medical personnel, leaving a private clinic in Geneva just 2 days before federal agents entered the hidden bunker beneath his estate. This raised both sympathy and suspicion. To some, it was a coincidence. To others, it was a meticulously timed exit. Meanwhile, Sharon Osbourne had disappeared from the public radar entirely. Known for her fierce public persona and quick-witted comebacks, Sharon had historically responded to criticism with fire and flair. But this time, she said nothing. Her social media accounts went dark. Scheduled public appearances in London were quietly cancelled. No public sightings were confirmed for over 3 weeks following the raid. This silence only fed the fire. The first official response came not from Ozzy, Sharon, or any family member, but from a spokesperson representing the Osbourne brand. The carefully worded statement read, "The Osbourne family is cooperating fully with authorities regarding the investigation into unauthorized construction beneath their residence. The family was unaware of the activities currently being examined by law enforcement. No further comment will be made at this time." It was a bland, sterile response. No emotion, no denial, no outrage. Just a vague gesture of cooperation. For many, it wasn't enough. That statement only deepened the questions. If the Osbournes were truly unaware of what lay beneath their mansion, then who authorized the building of a bunker that required biometric access, advanced surveillance technology, and constant chemical maintenance? Who maintained it for decades, undetected? And why did no one in the family, including Ozzy himself, question the bizarre security measures, the sealed doors, or the rooms they were reportedly told never to enter? Then, without warning, a tweet surfaced from Kelly Osbourne's now-deleted account. "None of you know what you're talking about. We warned him. We warned her. This is what happens when you ignore the signs." The tweet was quickly deleted, but screenshots spread like wildfire. Analysts and fans alike picked it apart. Who was her? Sharon? Someone else? What were the signs? Did Kelly know something long before the FBI ever showed up? The tweet was never addressed publicly, and Kelly Osbourne vanished from social media altogether within 24 hours. Her silence was noted by the public, especially given her usually vocal presence on controversial matters. Jack Osbourne, too, offered no comment, though his past involvement in producing paranormal reality shows was suddenly viewed in a new light. Days passed, then weeks. Behind the scenes, sources within law enforcement and entertainment began to whisper of Ozzy's declining condition. One hospital staff member, speaking anonymously, claimed that Ozzy was lucid but extremely anxious after learning about the raid. Another insider suggested that Ozzy had asked to speak to someone from the FBI, but that his legal team had stepped in before any interview could be arranged. Curiously, a letter surfaced, allegedly handwritten by Ozzy from his clinic room in Geneva. Published by an underground music blog that had previously posted leaked concert footage and unreleased demos, the letter read, "Whatever is going on back there, it wasn't my doing. I never asked for a dungeon. I never built anything. I was trying to get clean, trying to keep it together. If this is how it ends, well, I've seen worse. But I never took anyone. That's not me." The authenticity of the letter was immediately debated. Handwriting experts were inconclusive, citing similarities but also irregularities compared to Ozzy's known penmanship. The Osbourne family never confirmed nor denied its origin. But what stood out most was the tone of the letter, not defiant, not angry, but almost resigned, as if Ozzy were grappling with something larger than he could explain, something that had happened around him, without him, or perhaps in spite of him. Public opinion began to split. Some believed Ozzy was a scapegoat, an aging rock legend who had lost control of his own empire, surrounded by powerful handlers, managers, and unknown players who may have orchestrated something monstrous while he stumbled through the fog of addiction, fame, and failing health. Others weren't so forgiving. They pointed to decades of lyrics, interviews, and behaviors that, in hindsight, seemed laced with warnings. Occult references, satanic symbols, cryptic artwork on album covers, and even bizarre quotes from Ozzy himself that had once seemed like part of the act now carried a different weight. Like the infamous 1997 interview where he said, "There are things I've seen, places I've been, that no one would believe. Not even me, if I hadn't lived it." Or the 2005 moment on the Osbournes' reality show when he wandered into the basement during filming, stared at the camera, and mumbled, "They locked it for a reason." The crew laughed. The audience laughed. But that clip has since gone viral, recirculated with chilling context. As the investigation deepened, attention turned to Sharon. While Ozzy was viewed as the face of the brand, Sharon had always been the architect behind the empire. She was the business mind, the strategist, the fixer. And she had access to everything: financials, contracts, property deeds, private security. Documents leaked by a financial auditing firm hired by the family showed several large payments made over the last 20 years to overseas contractors and shell companies with no clear service descriptions. One transaction stood out: a 2011 payment of $7.4 million labeled as architectural stability. No record of structural work was ever found on the property during that time. Was Sharon aware of what was being built? Had she overseen it? When pressed by a Sky News reporter outside her gated home in London weeks later, Sharon offered only a cryptic line: "You all think you know us, but you only know what we let you see." That moment went viral within minutes. To many, it felt like a confession. To others, a warning. Meanwhile, Ozzy's legal team ramped up efforts to distance him from the investigation. A new statement was released claiming the property had been acquired with pre-existing underground architecture, and that no member of the Osbourne family ever had access to or knowledge of the lower chambers. But this raised even more eyebrows. If the family hadn't built the bunker, who had? Why had no inspections ever revealed it? The truth remained elusive. What the public saw was a man deteriorating in health, barely coherent at times, yet at the center of one of the most disturbing crime scenes ever uncovered in celebrity history. A man who had spent his life surrounded by spectacle and shadow, now swallowed by both. And as questions mounted, one thing became painfully clear: whether guilty, complicit, or simply a pawn in something far more intricate, Ozzy Osbourne's silence, both voluntary and imposed, would never be enough to silence the world around him. In the aftermath of the horrifying discovery beneath Ozzy Osbourne's estate, many were left grappling not just with the questions of guilt and complicity, but with a far more disturbing realization that this may not be an isolated incident. As more investigators, journalists, and insiders began to peel back the glittering curtain of celebrity culture, a trend emerged, one that had existed in plain sight but was seldom spoken about outside elite circles. The secret world of underground bunkers, hidden chambers, sealed rooms, and the unnerving lengths to which celebrities and the ultra-wealthy will go to protect not just their lives, but their secrets. At first glance, it sounds like a fringe conspiracy. The idea that entertainers and moguls would invest millions in underground lairs sounds more like a comic book plot than real-world practice. But the truth is, it's a booming industry. And it's one that's been growing quietly, almost invisibly, for decades. In Los Angeles, home to many of the world's richest and most powerful figures, the construction of subterranean safe rooms, tunnels, panic chambers, and private bunkers has been steadily rising since the 1980s. Originally designed for security and emergency preparedness, especially in an earthquake-prone city, these installations began as simple panic rooms. But as wealth and paranoia grew, so did the scale and ambition of these subterranean structures. One architectural firm, operating under strict NDAs and located in Bel Air, anonymously reported to a major publication that nearly 40% of their celebrity clients had requested deep substructures built into their estates. These were not small rooms for emergency escape. They were sprawling facilities, bunkers with independent air filtration systems, hydroponic gardens, armories, cryogenic freezers, and even internal surveillance systems separate from the rest of the house. One contractor reportedly worked on a bunker with 3 levels, an underground shooting range, and a tunnel that led to a disguised exit point a block away. And it wasn't just Hollywood elites. Tech billionaires in Silicon Valley, hedge fund managers in New York, and even influencers in Miami have commissioned similar structures. The pandemic only accelerated this trend. As global uncertainty spiked, so did the desire for secluded, survivable spaces. But why the secrecy? Because what these bunkers symbolize is more than just safety. They're power, control, a form of invisibility. And in some chilling cases, like the Osbourne estate, they may represent something even darker. Once news broke of the chamber beneath Ozzy's mansion, a wave of paranoia swept through the real estate world. New inspections were launched. Contractors were subpoenaed. Private security firms went quiet. A few brave whistleblowers came forward, former builders and security consultants who had worked for high-profile clients and claimed to have seen more than they were comfortable with. One such individual, who insisted on remaining anonymous, shared that a former A-list actor had a room designed entirely for psychological isolation experiments. The walls were lined with mirrors, the room was soundproofed, and there was a small port for feeding without direct contact. When asked why such a room was built, the client allegedly laughed and said, "It's just for fun, for guests." That property was later sold, and the new owner ordered the room demolished after discovering it during renovations. Another contractor described installing a lift system that descended into what looked like a surgical lab, complete with retractable tables, overhead lighting, and a wall of sealed drawers. He assumed it was for medical emergencies or doomsday prep. But when he returned to the site 6 months later to perform maintenance, the lab was gone, sealed, the entrance removed, as if it had never existed. These stories, once chalked up to eccentricity or paranoia, suddenly gained new weight in light of the Osbourne revelations. Why are so many celebrities drawn to building spaces that no one can see? What drives them to go beyond security into secrecy? The answer, according to psychologists, may be rooted in the culture of celebrity itself. Fame warps reality. When you spend years or decades being watched, judged, adored, and pursued, the desire to control your environment becomes almost pathological. Private spaces become sanctuaries, and for some, that need escalates. What begins as a retreat can quickly become a fortress. And when no one says no to you anymore, the lines between precaution and obsession, between security and secrecy, blur beyond recognition. In Ozzy's case, the existence of an underground bunker didn't immediately raise red flags among those who knew the industry. In fact, many assumed it was standard fare for someone of his stature, a place to hide in case of emergency, a luxury most would never afford. But what shocked even the most jaded insiders was the scale, the intent, and the evidence of ongoing use. The idea that such a facility had been maintained, upgraded, and possibly used for decades, without detection, was a wake-up call. If it happened there, how many others remain hidden? Public interest exploded as amateur investigators began compiling lists of celebrity properties known to have strange architectural features. Satellite images were analyzed. Historic permits were dug up. Blueprints were leaked. One Reddit thread, Hollywood's Hollow Houses, went viral after claiming to identify over 24 estates with suspicious underground layouts, properties owned by musicians, film producers, studio heads, and socialites. Among the most discussed were properties in Laurel Canyon, a neighborhood long associated with music legends and counterculture history. It's a place filled with twisted roads, hidden gates, and lore that reaches back to the 1960s. Stories of underground passages connecting homes, mysterious fires, and unexplained disappearances have circulated for decades. Now, in the wake of the Osbourne scandal, those stories are being re-examined with new urgency. Even more shocking were reports that some of these hidden facilities might not have been abandoned, but are still in use today. A former private chef, who had worked for multiple high-profile clients, claimed that one A-lister required all kitchen staff to sign strict non-disclosure agreements, specifically barring them from discussing a lower-level suite. The chef said he once accidentally entered the wrong hallway and saw a stairwell with a glowing keypad and a door made of reinforced steel. He was fired the next day. A Hollywood real estate agent, who has handled properties worth over $50 million, admitted in a podcast interview that she had seen at least 3 properties with sealed underground floors that were never shown to buyers. "They're not in the brochures," she said. "They're not even on the blueprints. You find out when the seller tells you, privately, that they'll show you the real house if the offer's serious enough." All of this paints a picture that is deeply unsettling. We live in a world where the ultra-rich and powerful have the means to create private realities, worlds beneath the surface where they are beyond law, beyond visibility, and beyond accountability. The Osbourne case exposed the terrifying possibilities of that power being abused. But what if it's not the only one? What if there are more chambers, more preserved lives, more stories hidden in the shadows of fame? Even as law enforcement continues to dig, both literally and figuratively, into the Osbourne estate and the history of its construction, the ripple effect has already begun. City officials have called for stricter permit inspections. Watchdog groups are demanding transparency from high-end contractors. And ordinary people are asking questions they never thought to ask. What's beneath that mansion? What secrets are hidden behind fame? The cultural reckoning sparked by this case may be just beginning. And while some continue to defend the idea of privacy for the rich and famous, others argue that secrecy at this level, this depth, can no longer be ignored. The ground beneath Hollywood may hold more than just pipes and bedrock. It may hold the forgotten, the hidden, the silenced,